And just as an aside, I find it always exciting to talk in a semi-dark room. From childhood, I'm sure. But it's exciting to be here with you in this semi-dark room. And my role right now is just basically to welcome you to this event and to thank our sponsors, which are many, and I'm just going to do that right now. First of all, I want to thank the Consulate General of Mexico here in Houston, who've been such a wonderful partner and for this event, and in 2 weeks' time we have a Contemporary Mexican Film Festival as well. The Department of Hispanic Studies, the Americas Research Center, the Multicultural Community Relations Department here, and the Public Affairs of Rice University, and of course Rice Cinema and the Department of Visual and Dramatic Arts. I also want to mention a few people who have been instrumental in bringing this all together. First and foremost, I have to start out with my young colleague who you'll meet in a few minutes, Manuel Gutierrez. He is the reason why this event is here today. I want to thank my good friend David Medina, who's the Director of Multicultural Community Relations Department. He's sitting somewhere back there. Maria Esther Paredes from the Mexican Consulate. She's right here next to our other new friend, Patricia Berbar. Our good friend Rosemary Saloon, founder and director of Literal Magazine. She's going to be taping this tonight. David Medina's wonderful assistant, Shelby Thurston, who you'll meet later, or you probably met her. She was already at the opening at the doorway. Charles Dove, who's the director. Charles is over here. He's the mastermind director and basically the maestro of the media center. Without him, we couldn't do all these things. So we're so grateful, Charles, for your work. And as I mentioned, 2 weeks from today, there'll be a Contemporary Mexican Film Festival. Please come. It's open to the public. We will have an introduction on contemporary Mexican film from our colleague at the University of Houston, Katrina Sis, and she's right here, Professor Sis. And so we're looking forward to her introduction as well in 2 weeks' time. There's a lot of events going on this fall and next spring. I just want to mention a couple. At the Art Gallery, for the first time, we have a Mexican-American Chicana artist installing her vision for this fall semester. It'll open September 29th and run through December 11th. She will be talking at the opening on September 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Art Gallery. Later this fall, we'll have two wonderful writers from Mexico. On October 21st, Jesus Silva Marquez will be here with us, and on November 9th, Mario Vallantin as well. All these events and lectures and other things in the spring can be found on the website of the Hispanic Studies Department. And I invite you to check out our website and to see for all the wonderful events. And now I just want to quickly introduce my two wonderful colleagues. On my immediate left is Manuel Gutierrez, as I mentioned before, and my farther left is Dr. Luis Duno Gothberg. They will be in charge of doing the interview this evening. But first, Manuel, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin my introduction, allow me to thank our special guests, Arturo Ripstein and Alicia Garciadiego, for accepting our invitation to come to Rice University and for allowing the Department of Hispanic Studies to host a retrospective of their work. It was very kind of them to be here with us. They have a terribly busy schedule. Thank you very much. The 4 films that my colleague Luis Duno and I have selected are only a small sampling of a celebrated career that spans 4 decades. The films El Castillo y la Pureza, along with Principio y Fin, Profundo Carmesí, and El Carnaval de Sodoma, which will be presented in the following days, offer a small but significant window into Ripstein's cinematic vision, a vision that has intrigued audiences and critics alike on both sides of the Atlantic. This retrospective and the interviews that we are conducting today and tomorrow with our guests are only the first part of a more extensive project that Professor Duno and myself have undertaken. As we gather tonight, we are coordinating the publication of the first English-language volume of scholarly essays dedicated to the works of Arturo Ripstein and Alicia Garciadiego. The book will include scholarly contributions from around the world, and in fact, just this week we have begun to receive the first essays of our collection. Of course, there are already numerous books and dissertations dedicated to their work in other languages, including Spanish, Greek, Italian, and French, but we think it's time to correct a significant lapse in North American film and cultural studies. Curiously enough, regarding this gap, the New York Times recently wrote that there exists an enormous oversight of a legend that is unfortunate for American audiences at the very least, and that's a quote from the New York Times. So we hope that this book will contribute to correcting that lapse. Our guest tonight, Arturo Ripstein, was born in Mexico City in 1943, and he's among the most internationally recognized film auteurs of the second half of the 20th century. Ripstein made his directorial and screenwriting debut in 1965 with Tiempo de Morir, and since then he has directed 28 films, 4 documentaries, and numerous shorts. Among the world of cinephiles, there's a rule that no good films come out of literary adaptations, but Arturo Ripstein, in this facet of his career, as in others, is an exception to the rule, as he has directed some of Alicia Garciadiego's adaptations of some very celebrated works of literature, including El Coronel no tiene quien escriba, written by the Nobel laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Naguib Mahfouz, The Beginning and the End, a film which we will show tomorrow, and for which in 1994 Arturo Ripstein received the Golden Shot at San Sebastián Film Festival. Over the years, Ripstein has collaborated with a number of important Latin American writers, including Carlos Fuente in a film titled Tiempo de Morir, José Emilio Pacheco for El Castillo de la Pobreza, the film that we're screening tonight, José Donoso in El Lugar Sin Límites, translated to English as Hell Has No Limits, and Vicente Leñero, with whom he wrote La Tía Alejandra, or Aunt Alejandra. His last 13 films have been written by Alicia Garciadiego, his constant collaborator. His films have been awarded many prizes and have been screened at film festivals around the world, including Venice, Cannes, San Sebastián, San Francisco, and Sundance. In 1997, Arturo Ripstein was awarded the National Prize for the Arts in Mexico, becoming the only filmmaker, aside from Luis Buñuel, to have received the honor. His most recent film, Las Razones del Corazón, will premiere next week in San Sebastián, am I correct, next week? Of Arturo Ripstein's films, the Brazilian film critic Pablo Antonio Paranagua has written, breaking the dominant norms of audiovisual production, the singular style of Ripstein represents a belief in the capacity of cinema to portray the paradoxes of the human soul. As we will see tonight, Ripstein's vision is not only singular, but illuminating. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Arturo Ripstein. So, Arturo, would you please share with our audience, I read this quote where you said that you never had a choice in career, that you were destined for film. Can you share with them how you came upon becoming a film director?
No.
No.
Before anything, I want to thank Manuel and Reese here for having me as and the chair of the department. Then he introduced everybody, so I reiterate my gratitude, and it is really an honor for us to be here, talking about our films and sharing them with you. The films that we do are rather in the periphery. We are sort of peripheral filmmakers. I've never been mainstream. I mean, no Mexican has ever been mainstream, but I am quite on the outskirts of anything. So having people like you come and share this with us is formidable. You make us, I've said it many times, but you make us the invisible filmmakers visible, at least for the duration. A film is, of course, in our case, as we are very peripheral, there's no monetary feasibilities in our work. It's just an act of love. So sharing an act of love is probably the most important thing that we can do, and we share it with you painfully and gratefully. Now, to answer your question, I was born into film. My father was a very well-known film producer in Mexico. So I always went with him to, well, when he took me, which was not always, I had to behave. And so I tried my best to do it or get some good grades in order to accompany him. But he took me and he liked it. He made me dress up and took me to his partners in the industry, and I didn't like going to see his partners. I wanted to go to the set, to the stages where they were shooting the films, and that was absolutely fascinating. Probably my first memory in life is at 3 years old, sitting in the lap of Carlos Savage, a very well-known editor in Mexico who edited most of the Mexican films by Luis Buñuel, and sitting on his lap there. We used to edit films then in complicated machines called moviolas, and they had a little glass, a little magnifying glass, round, very many years ago, and under the glass they used to put the film strip, the photographic film strip in one side, and the optical sound in the other. After the whole process, they're bound together in only one film, but this too. So there I was sitting with him, watching the little magnifying glass on top of the film, and all of a sudden he pressed the thing, put some levers up or something, it started to move. And under the magnifying glass, there was this sort of tree, a log, something that was going throughout the whole frame. And it started to move and make a lot of noise. It was fascinating. And from behind the log, 3 charros came out with guitars and started to sing. And when they started to sing behind them, it was little and it was wonderful, and of course black and white. I said, I don't want to go away from here ever. It was wonderful. And going to visit my father and whatever I could visit throughout the times when they were shooting movies, it was absolutely fascinating. When I was a young boy, one didn't used to travel as much as one does now. At a given point, somebody asked me, what do you think an airplane is like? So I said, well, it's a round thing with wings, and it's got windows and seats and reflectors and cables and movie directors' chairs and a camera. So what do you think a train is? A train was a thing that moved with movie directors, with a film, with a director's chair and cables and lights and a camera. Everything that I imagined, thought of, liked, dreamed of, was a place that had a camera. And I knew then that I would never leave. And at a given point it was very complicated because my father wanted me to be a decent person. So I studied law because he asked me to do that, and at the middle of my studies I left it, and then I studied history, and that was even worse because in law it was good. We started at 7 o'clock in the morning and ended up at around 11, so I had time to go see movie making. And when I studied history, I was in the Colegio de Mexico, a very distinguished place to study. And it started at 8 o'clock in the morning and ended up at 8 o'clock at night, so I hated it because I couldn't go see films. I left that, my father cried and I cried and we all cried. And so one day I said, I have to convince you to let me do it. And he said, I don't want that, I want you to finish have a degree, be prepared for eventualities, maybe you won't work as a film director. He was right. And at a given point I said, either I kill myself or kill you, and that did it. I started to prepare my first film, but I never ever had the idea of doing anything else. There's a wonderful thing, a friend of mine that was in school with me, Francisco Pablo, who's sitting somewhere around here, should remember. I was the only, first of all, I was the only bald kid in 5th grade. And after that, I was the only one that wanted exactly to be what I became. All the rest of the kids wanted to do one thing or another, and most of them changed. But he should remember that I was the only one eager enough to do exactly what I wanted. I never had any other vocation. Not vocation, no, I have nothing. It was destiny. Manifest destiny.
So you were talking about then making your first movie. How was that process of making your first movie, and how was it to make that first movie in that particular moment of Mexican film history?
It was very complicated, like it's always been. The history of Mexican film is a history of a series of crises that it's gone through, so it's always very, very complicated. I didn't begin my career with a golden age of Mexican film, which was an age of stars, of very big stars, and I entered a little after that, when we had to destroy everything that was behind us. Not the very beginnings of film, which was quite fascinating, but the middle period. We belonged to a generation of iconoclasts that wanted to destroy everything, and we had really probably the worst movies possible just immediately before we started. So when I told my father that I wanted to make a movie, and he accepted finally after a long, long struggle, he said, okay, we had a big company, and he said, I have writers here, so choose whichever writer you want to work with. So I said, no, I have this friend that he was a young 34, 35-year-old Colombian writer called Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was worked in the ads and publicity, and he did slogans like arriba la camisa y abajo el pantalón. And so I had read El Coronel no tiene quien le escriba and Los funerales de la mamá grande, which were the only two books that one could get in Mexico, and I liked it very much, and I met him through a mutual friend, and we became friends, and I told him, why don't you give me why don't you help me write a screenplay? And he said, fine, let's go ahead and do it. And he had this screenplay that was written for another director called Charro, so it was wonderful. The structure of the screenplay was really magnificent, and an example of how to structure certain things. It was really, really good. So I went to my father and said, I have this film called Charro that had certain things that were not very common in Mexican film at the time. And my father said, forget it completely. You have to do a Western. Okay, how do we do a Western? Well, you just dress them up like it's a Western, and it'll be a Western. So Mexican Westerns, or spaghetti Westerns at the time, were made out of wardrobe. And so he said wardrobe, and we'll see how we go ahead and do it. And I didn't like it at the beginning, but I accepted it because it was the only way for me to get the movie going. And it ended up being a Western, because Westerns were the only genre in Mexican film that were sold to Germany, which was the only the only country that was buying Mexican movies then. Colombia and all those other countries, which used to be our natural clients, had gone broke in all sorts of economical disasters. So it was only Germany, and Germany wanted Western. So I did this thing that was not a Western, it was not nothing, and I was always very dissatisfied with the end results. But cowardice being one of my big my big emotions and one of my big attributes, I just went and I accepted and I did it, and that began a long career.
Who else helped you with the screenplay?
Well, we did it ourselves, and at the end it was it had Colombian dialogue. So we went to Carlos Fuentes to tell him to give us a hand. Carlos Fuentes was another young director friend of ours, and we used to meet in his house, and he used to invite people, and it was quite fascinating because you always ended up getting drunk with William Styron and Susan Sontag and things like that, so it was nice. So I told him, why don't you give us a hand? He was a good friend of Garcia Marquez at that time. They just finished adapting a Juan Rulfo piece called El Gallo de Oro, and so they worked together well.
Which you later made yourself.
I remade it just to show him how to do it well. They busted. And so Carlos Fuentes wrote the dialogue in Mexican, but it was a very strange Mexican that he used. He used 18th century Mexican with phrases that nobody knew and sicknesses that nobody had heard of. So it's peculiar. It's allegorical at the end, and it's nicely structured but allegorical. A Western with 18th century parlance, and very, very complicated. I wish I could have done it again. I wish the God of filmmakers, San Luis Buñuel, would grant every filmmaker in the world the possibility to do 2 or 3 films at the most, but do it many, 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 many times. Till at the, of course, there was exceptions like Fellini or Kurosawa, but then again, they're not attained.
What would you do to Tiempo de Morir?
What?
What would you do to Tiempo de Morir?
I do it well.
It's a wonderful movie. I don't trust it. It's a fascinating movie.
No, it is not. It's a film that lacks many things. It's really a film that is not complete, is not round. One tries to make figures that are precise, and one tends to do a sphere. One ends up with a circle, which is the closest thing you can do for a sphere when you're structuring a film. But this is very flawed. It's not a good film at all. It's just old, and that is for its benefit, but it's not a good film at all. If one can do 2 or 3 films, Borges wanted to be remembered by a phrase. Borges, that is like Kurosawa. I want to be remembered by one sequence, one. It doesn't matter which, not Tiempo de Morir, certainly, but the most recent ones, of course, and I don't want to be remembered at all.
Now that you brought up San Luis Buñuel, would you share with our audience a little bit about your relationship to him and your connection, and maybe speak about your early influences in film?
Yes, I knew Buñuel because he was a friend of my father's, and they both liked guns very much, so we went to shoot at shooting galleries and things like that, and they loved it. And I liked guns too then, still do. And so my father and Buñuel were very close because of the guns. They never worked together because they were in completely different worlds. And I used to go to the movies with my family, with my mother and my father. Tried my best not to take my sisters, who were not only younger, but feminine, and that was complicated. But I went with my mother and father to the movies many times, and one day my father took me to see Nazarin. I was about 15, and it was a revelation. I had seen my father's films and the Mexican films that one sees at the time, in the American films that were fascinating. You know, Flying Carpets and Ivanhoe and Scaramouche and wonderful movies, and the Mexican films, which were basically commercial films. And when I saw Nazarin, I understood that there were options. There were possibilities to differ in the films that I saw regularly. And I was completely shocked. And I remember asking my father, "Did you like this film?" And he said, "Well, more or less, he liked Buñuel, so he wanted to like the film, and I guess he did. But I was in so much of a shock. My father didn't understand what was happening to me. I stuttered, I couldn't talk, and he said, "No, I don't like it at all. Just to be nice to me, I guess." But I said, "I've never seen anything like this. This is magnificent." So I went to see Buñuel to his house, and I knocked on the door, and I said, he knew who I was. And being the son of a producer then was the equivalent of being completely idiotic. There were a lot of producer son, and it was true. And my friends that I grew up with. And I went to Buñuel, and he was not too flattered. I knocked at the door, I opened the door, and I said, I saw your film last week, and I want to be a director like you." He closed the door in my face at that point. He said, "Nothing, just close the door." I stayed there. It's complicated to go from my house to his house, and got to take a bus, and it was long, far away. A minute after, he opened the door, and he said, "Come in." I went in, and he sat me in his living room, and he had a little projector somewhere there, 16mm projector, and he said, "Sit down." And he took the projector, and he pushed a little reel on the projector, put the lights off, put the buttons down, and the lights off, and he made the thing work, and it was Un Chien Andalou. Yes, Lucian Dog, and I was 15, and I was watching this, and it was even more surprising than Nazarin, of course. To me, it was paralyzing. So we finished the film. He returned the film and put it again. And so I saw it 2 times in one day. And he said, "This is what I do. So I don't think you want to do this," because of course I was a producer's son. I would never split an eye. And I said, "No, I want to do it more than ever." So we talked, and he was generous to me at the time, and I left. And from there on, it was just marvelous. And I learned my craft by watching movies and reading about movies. You had to go to the cinema to watch films. There were no DVDs or anything like that. No films and television even. So you had to go to the movies, and you had to read about films. And in my case, my privilege was I was a producer's son, so I could see how the films were made. And I went to many directors and asked them to let me sit with him and ask him questions if I could, which they would allow me at a given point, especially if they were working for my father. They wouldn't kick me out soon. They would later, but not immediately. And with Buñuel, it was the same thing. I asked him, "Can I go and see you work your next movie?" That was 3 years later. I was 18 then. And he said, "Yeah, you can come a couple of times," or something like that. I tried to go as much as I could. He was shooting The Exterminating Angel, which was also quite an astonishing experience. So I learned my craft by watching how films were made, and the icing of the cake was watching Buñuel make The Exterminating Angel. Of course, one couldn't learn a lot of things from Buñuel. One learns from the band of directors. They're enormously stimulating. You're 17 and you're watching him and say, I can do it better. When you get to Buñuel, you can't do it better. It was that and that was it. But I liked his work, and I was eager to see his stuff then, and I try to find his films in film clubs. That's where you could go see Buñuel stuff and everybody's stuff. So my influences at that time were naturally the American filmmakers, John Ford and Wells and Land, of course, and all those were the United States making movies. And on the other side was the French Nouvelle Vague, of course, and the Italians of the time. It was post the neo-realist movement of Italian cinema. It was Fellini and Visconti, already established as Fellini and Visconti, that I adored at that time, and naturally Kurosawa. The list of directors that have influenced my career is exactly the same list as all of the directors of my generation. We like the same stuff.
I want to touch a little bit about the topic of your relationship with Mexican cinematographic tradition, but talking through Buñuel. You said famously that Buñuel kind of dismantled Mexican cinema from the golden era, and have this beautiful phrase saying that Buñuel did not give us the dream, he gave us the nightmare. Mm-hmm. How do you position your own cinema in relation to this phrase and Mexican cinematic tradition?
I don't know. It's very difficult for me to sort of pinpoint that sort of things. When I was a young director, that sort of question used to be made in relation to your constants. That was what was going on at the time. It was a little before semiotics. So what you did were you did constant themes. You used constant themes. So when they asked me what are your constant themes, I always had to invent some answer to seem alluring or bright, and I used to say intolerance is my constant theme, and it sounded fantastic. It's rotund, it's enormous, it's a lie. It's not true. So finding exactly what how I am situated in the context is complicated. I make movies out of fear and out of revenge. Like almost everybody. I mean, you're in reality, and reality is something that is horrible. It's got no structure. You don't know really where you're heading, so one tries to avoid. I tried to avoid reality as much as I could. So the way of my stuff was structuring certain things that were a revenge against reality, against the world that I had to live in. So there are two possibilities when you work within the revenge frame, and that's you go into saying life is beautiful, everything is wonderful, and one should feel good when you go to cinema and you see reality structured, which is nice. Or the other option is everything is terrible. I mean, we live in a nightmare. I come from a country of survivalists and nightmares, and it's difficult. So when you're in that point, your revenge against reality is things are somber and sad and frightening. And it's stimulating because when people come out of the theater, in the audience that I always have, they come out and say, yeah, it's not that bad. So you wake up like from the nightmare. So waking up from the nightmare, helping them wake up from the nightmare, is the way to tell you that I'm an optimist. That I still believe in. Okay, optimism is good enough so that I can keep on doing films. It's either it's optimism and I don't know how the word in English, but in Spanish it's contumacia. And you go on doing films for that and for amnesia. Yeah, you do a movie and it sticks with you for a long time, and the only way to get rid of it is to do another one. So I pity the young directors now who make careers of 2 movies or 3, and that's it. I made a long career out of willfulness and fear and whatever, but I forgot all the rest of the things that I had done before. So it's good to keep on making movies because you forget the ones that you did, which are become quite obsessive. I also make movies out of fear. Well, the things that I'm most afraid of, which are what are in my movies, is what I usually talk about. Fear is an enormous emotion, and if you can handle it and you can talk about it and you can put it in a movie, and you can structure it, which is what it's all about, it is a good feeling. So I wouldn't know where I belong. I know that I made the movies, many of the movies, how I wanted to make them. I made more movies than I should have, but many more movies than I should have. I should have made 2 or 3 many times over, and till they're like rounded rocks, rounded by the pass of water, which makes it beautiful. So what one tends to do is beautiful things. So one should do not many, but I've made a lot of films, and I always thought that I would make a good movie. I never went into a film saying this is not going to be good except once. But it's not my worst film. There are much worse films. I always went into film saying I'm going to try to do the best thing possible. I'm going to try to do a good film, and that's very weighty on your head, trying to do a good film. But that's as far as I go. When I entered the new format of making films in the digital with the digital camera, I remember talking to Paz and telling her, we're going to do this films with a digital camera. And she said, it's not going to be influential to me. I'm going to write my script like I've always did. And what's it going to change to me? And I said, it's going to change that we have the precise, absolute knowledge that it won't be our last film. Because we can do another one because it's cheap and it's little, and you can always go to friends and then cheat them and tell them that you're doing a wonderful thing and they go for free. So it's little. When you do films and that, it's little. And one thing that is very important when you do these little films, this format, is you know it's not going to be your last movie because you can do another one. It's difficult because you know you can do another one. When you're making photographic films, you know every film is the last one. You will never be able to get it going again. But in this case, when it's not the last movie, the important thing is you don't have to think that you have to do a good movie. You have to think that you're only doing a film, and it doesn't matter if it's good or not good. If it's good, it might go to a festival or it might be shown in a theater. If it isn't, it'll go directly to the DVD section in Blockbuster, where nobody picks it up because it's Mexican. And but you can keep on doing it. I mean, the loss will always occur. Economically, it's always going to be a disaster. But when you do it little, it's not that harsh. The disaster is smaller. So you can go on doing films, and you can go on doing films. It doesn't matter if you do it good or not. You just do the film, and that is very liberating. Not thinking of doing a good movie is very liberating. The monthly sword in your head, that goes away.
Arturo, before we open up some questions from the audience, would you set up this film, El Castillo de la Pureza, which is an early film of yours? Looking back on it now, for so many years, what do you remember from that experience, and what was it like to go through the filming of this movie?
It's a nice. It was a nice movie to make. It was very long and complicated story, but I'll make it short. Dolores del Rio wanted to do a play by Sergio Magaña called Motivos del Lobo, a lovely play, that was based on true facts that were later depicted in this movie. This guy kept his family inside a house for 18 years and wouldn't let them leave. So there was this play, and Dolores del Rio wanted Luis Buñuel to direct this film, and Buñuel said, no, give it to the snotty guy there. And so I got the work. And José Emilio Pacheco and me, we wrote the script, and we read the script eventually to her. It was quite fascinating to go to Dolores del Rio's house in Coyoacán, in Mexico. I mean, an enormous house, and she would come out from this on top of the banister, and she would put her hand there and yelled a little and said, "Ripstein, how do you like my hair?" He looked this big, the enormity. It was fantastic. And Pacheco and myself were, when we went to her house to read to her, we were usually drunk, so it made it wonderful. So she liked the script very, very much, and she wanted me to put an actor that I didn't like. And I said, I don't want to make the movie with this actor. And so Gabriel Figueroa, who was going to be the photographer, and Barbachano, the producer, very big names at that point, said, well, if Dolores wants this actor, you have no choice. You have to do it like that. And so I said, I'm sorry, no. So they said, well, we'll have to fire you because so I said, you cannot fire me because you have not paid for the script, so the script is mine, so I'm firing you. So I fired Dolores del Rio, Gabriel Figueroa, and Manuel Barbachano. At that time, it was quite fascinating.
You were 27 years old.
Yeah, I was old. I've been making movies for 5 years already, or 6. And I was raised, so I knew how to do it. And this film is about this case that really had an impact in Mexico in the late 40s, beginning of the 50s, in which this man kept his family inside a house and wouldn't allow them to leave. And we sat down, we wrote it, José Emilio Pacheco and myself, we thought it was one of the greatest comedies written. We read it, and it was kind of, we laughed like crazy, constantly. So then we read it to a couple of wives that we had at the moment. And let me read it to you. And we read it, and the couple of wives were there in panic, and Pacheco and myself were belly laughs and rolling on the floor, thinking it was absolutely comedic and fantastic. It is a little bit, but not as much as we thought. And, so it's based on a real case that was quite shocking at the time. And when the film was shown, a very, very, very successful film in its time. And it was a film where many people came to me after the projection of the film saying, it's the story of my family, things that happened constantly and very peculiar. I never knew people were locked inside houses so much at the time. So it was that, but I was just planning on an autobiographical sketch, which is Gabriel Lima is me, and a little bit, but in many things. But everybody thought it was their own portrait. I think that was good at the time.
Thank you for answering our questions.
I think we should now open the space for a few questions from the audience. We have not too much time because we have to start the screening, but please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions or comments.
Yeah, over here. I wanted to find out, did you film on set or was that an original house where it happened? Wasn't that a house close to downtown Mexico City? Did you shoot there or did you do it on a set?
No, actually the real house was very far away from downtown Mexico City. It was actually near the Bellac. It was far away. It was quite away from neighbors and things like that, which was a peculiarity at the point. No, we invented this set. Just the outside is real, and the house is a set done by magnificent decorator, set designer called Fontanals. It was his last film. He had worked with Garciadiego and with D'Annunzio and things, absolutely fascinating things. When I used to talk to him, he was a very old man, so he said, yes, when D'Annunzio and I made this movie, this piece, or when Garciadiego, he was fantastic, and this was his last movie. He was very, very old when he did it. And he told me a lovely phrase at the end when he gave me the set, and he said, okay, now you can come visit it, and it's yours now. And he said, I want to thank you very much, you're very old, for letting me retire with dignity. And I always thanked him for that. It was also the last film that Alex Phillips, the cameraman, made before they both died. I always like to work with very experienced, serious people. The genius of a film director always consists of surrounding himself with the best people possible and letting them do more or less what they know how to do. So this is the case in here.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned Dolores del Rio and the figure of the Charo and John Ford, if you could just reflect on what you took from John Ford.
Everything. Absolutely everything. John Ford makes movies like before movies existed. John Ford is the greatest of all directors, no doubt. John Ford is copying things from stealing things from John Ford is like stealing from nature. He was there before everything happened. He will be there after everything occurred.
Yes.
What do you consider to be the most difficult part of directing a film?
Basically putting it together. Going and convincing producers to give you the money to do it. And you usually have to do all sorts of things there. When you have to cheat all sorts of people in order to get them to give you the money and get them to believe that you're going to do a magnificent movie or whatever. So you do anything and to get the money to get to a movie. You sell your mother, your sisters, your father, you do anything to get. So that's the most complicated thing. Once it's all put together, it's a question of craft and magnificence and getting the best people possible around you. Let them more or less do their work. Not that I don't control it, I'm a very controlling director, but I'm very respectful of the craft of people. And so when I look at them do the things, I'm quite fascinated, like I was when I was a 3-year-old kid sitting in Carlos Savage watching him do his work. I still am fascinated by that. So that is the nice, easy part. The horrible part is getting the thing put together. The rest is just lovely.
Any other questions or comments? No?
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you so much.